Hi, let's take a brief moment to listen to these melodies. Wow, that sounds okay, I guess. Let's fix it with things I learned from a specific theory from the Renaissance called Modal Counterpoint. Welcome to another topic of this video series about melodic writing, and this one is about counterpoint. Now, counterpoint is a word used to all extent by music educators. And since I've started talking about counterpoint on this channel, I realized there's kind of a sense of confusion. So to clarify, the term counterpoint can, yes, refer to the relationship between two or more musical lines, which involve counter melodies and imitation. And I found that online, when music educators use the term counterpoint, it's often in that sense that they use it. But when I'm talking about counterpoint here, I'm talking about a specific theory that I think is very important for melodic writing. And it's quite different from everything we learn online nowadays about classical music theory, because it's a theory that was there before classical music. So the theory is called modal counterpoint. It's also called strict counterpoint, Renaissance counterpoint, species counterpoint. So modal counterpoint refer to the strict adherence to the rules and principles of traditional contrapuntal composition, particularly codified in Renaissance and Baroque music. And now, like I said, the fact that this theory was conceived before the classical period, before all the theory that is now available nowadays, and that we base all our musical knowledge on, well, that's quite important, and that's why I'm bringing this to you today. So modal counterpoint involved the simultaneous sounding of independent melodic lines. That also means that none of them is more important than another. And these melodic lines interact harmonically and contrapuntally, creating a rich and textured musical fabric. Now, I just want to mention why we use the term counterpoint nowadays to talk about different musical lines working together. Well, it's because of that specific theory which was created in the Renaissance period. But nobody talks about modal counterpoint, and that's why I'm here. Now, modal counterpoint is taught in most universities and is more of like an exercise. It's like four-part chorale writing, which have very different rules from modal counterpoint, because the way four-part chorales is taught nowadays, well, it's mostly around the idea of tonality. Now, there are some great books to learn about counterpoints, and I'll go over those later in the video. So in modal counterpoint, the composers follow very strict guidelines regarding notably voice leading and intervallic relationships. These guidelines govern how individual voices move in relation with each other, ensuring smooth and coherent musical motion while using dissonance with a very specific set of rules. Also note that back then, again, there was no tonal system. Composers were using modes, so the harmonic rules were very different, and in general, far more flexible. There were no perfect cadences, there were no dominants, there was nothing like that. In that period, in the 16th century, we had a more horizontal kind of perspective on music, which became increasingly vertical with the coming of tonality. So this meant that before then you were composing the melodies first, from which the harmonies took form, instead of having a chord progression on which you would compose melodies. Now, what's interesting about modal counterpoint is that there was no concept of developing a thematic back then. It was not something characteristic of the Renaissance period. There was although this idea of having a cantus firmus, which was a line that you cannot touch, a very basic line, very easy to sing, on which you would compose your counterpoint. But still, it was just mostly a group of different notes, and it wasn't very characteristic. It was usually very long notes. So there was not really a thematic element to it. Themes and counter themes were something that came in later with Bach, the fugue, the classical period. So in modal counterpoint, all lines are equal. None should stand out. To some, it might sound counterintuitive, as we are mostly taught nowadays to create some depth with different layers and to create a hierarchy in our music. But this hierarchy comes from a mindset we inherited from the tonal system later on. So I believe that working with modal counterpoint can help us develop music in a different mindset and maybe approach a different theoric aesthetic of music that can nourish us as a modern composer. Now, if you've been following my channel, you've probably seen my video where I do a full 5-voice counterpoint. I still do this exercise even with 15 years of experience as a professional composer, and even if it's very far from my modern and contemporary harmonic writing. But I do it because there are some essential concepts that are in counterpoint, and I want to highlight one of them. It's called voice leading. In counterpoint, each voice or part move logically from one pitch to another, typically following principles such as stepwise motion, contrary motion, occasional leaps within prescribed limits. So this is called voice leading. Does the part goes up? Does the part goes down? Is it doing steps or skips? Now this next one is interesting. Are the skips balanced with the contrary motion before and or after? To understand this last concept, let's see this example. So which one of these two lines do you think is better? Let's look at the skips in the upper line. We have one skip going up and two skips going down. Pay attention to the direction of the line before and after the skips. They should be compensating the skip by going into another direction, and here they are not. So this line we could say is not very contrapuntal. Now in the second line, I basically fix what was wrong in the first one by changing the direction of the skips. Now the direction of the line before and after are compensating it. The ultimate test to really understand how this makes a better melody is to sing it. So the first one, fa sol la si do fa sol la sol mi re do fa mi re mi fa. It's pretty hard to sing. There's many different registers. There's a bigger impetus. Now I know I'm not Celine Dion, but let's try the second one. Fa sol la si do fa sol la sol mi re do fa mi re mi fa. Now this is much easier to sing. I have much more references. It feels like it's well tied up together. We can really hear that the second one is kind of more lyrical. So I did mention that modal counterpoint was not using tonality. And what I think is interesting about teaching modal counterpoint is that it's closer than the classical period to what we use nowadays in harmony. Nobody do this. I mean, it just sounds classical, unless you're the new Yngwie Malmsteen and you like neoclassical metal. Like in pop and classical, in electronic music, we mostly use modes to create some colors instead of like functional harmony that comes from the classical period. So again, modal counterpoint might be more interesting for you to learn than classical music theory, I think. So I know I don't go too much in detail about counterpoint and all its rules because it's kind of a big topic, but I just want to advocate for it here as I think it can help you get a better understanding of what is a good melody, having a good sense of voice leading, having a good awareness of the direction of your melody. One of the most crucial elements in melodic writing is to make sure that the melody and the chords accompany it have an interesting relationship. And really, that's what counterpoint is all about. Now, in this piano example, we can see I use contrary motions between the melody and the bass for the last two phrases. This characteristic is often encouraged in counterpoint lines and can help create lines that feel more independent. Let's listen again to the example I presented at the beginning of the video. Now here's another example with orchestral sound. Now, if you'd like to start studying modal counterpoint, at the time I'm publishing this video, I'm currently preparing a modal counterpoint course that I will be making available for you later this year. When it's available, I'll be putting a link down in the description below, probably up here. In the meantime, if you want to learn about modal counterpoint by yourself, here are my book suggestions. The first one is Modern Counterpoint Renaissance Style by Peter Schubert. Peter Schubert is an expert of Renaissance writing. He's one of the great teachers here at the McGill University in Montreal, and this is really my first recommendation. But I do have a personal favorite book if you read French. It's called Le Précis des Règles du Contrepoint de Charles Coquelin. So it's funny in that book because Coquelin presents all the rules, and then he presents counterpoint exercise with tons of footnotes explaining why he's breaking the rules in the examples. I find it interesting because it's actually a good composition lesson. Any system that have too strict rules can lead to having a music that can feel rigid at some times. So take what you learn from these exercise and apply it to the context of your modern harmonic or melodic writing, and you see a big difference, I can guarantee. I hope you're enjoying this series about melodic writing. Now click here to go and learn about the next topic, which is about orchestration.